Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week our reading is centered around the book of Luke, and today I'm joined by Alyssa Bream and Zack Unkenholz. So we're going to dive into our question from our reading today in Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 23. And it says this, it says, hearing this, so there's something going on beforehand. Hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaimed, "What a blessing it will be to attend the banquet in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, "Come, the banquet is ready." But they all began making excuses. One said, "I have just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I've just bought 5 pairs of oxen and I want to try them out. Please excuse me." Another said, "I just got married, so I can't come." The servant returned and told his master what they had said, and his master was furious and said, "Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." I've heard this passage preached many, many different ways. And I know this is going to sound weird. I right now I'm reading through the Bible through a different lens than I think I've ever read it through before. Because it is easy to say, okay, this is the way I've always heard it, and make this assumption that that's what's going on. And I have heard this passage preached about serving in the church, participating in the church, coming to church. But I'm not 100% sure that any of those accurately apply. It seems to me that it is just a simple invitation of the Lord, to come and participate, whatever that invitation is. And so the question I want to ask today are, what are some common excuses people use now? We don't hear, I just bought 5 pair of oxen. Nobody has ever given that excuse to me at church.
I think you probably have heard, "I bought a new boat."
Yeah, I have. Yeah. So that's what I want to talk about is modern excuses that we hear that would apply to this. Or I bought a new lawnmower. That would be even closer. That they're out pretending they're doing work, or whatever. But what are some common excuses you hear from accepting an invitation from the Lord? And I think this is much broader. And the reason I say that, the reason why this is rumbling around in my heart this morning, is because I'm a couple of weeks ahead on sermon prep, and we've already done Matthew, but there's a particular verse about leaven in dough and how it spreads. And I've only heard it preached one way. But in the context of where it's at, in Matthew, in the kingdom of God, that can't be what it's talking about. Like, it just doesn't make sense for that to be the case. And so I'm the whole, okay, this is the way I've always heard it. I need to reframe this a little bit, is rumbling around in my head right this minute. But what are some common excuses that people just refuse an invitation from the Lord? And it could be an invitation to draw closer. It could be an invitation to salvation. I think all of us have experienced multiple invitations of the Lord, over time. It's not just a singular thing. But what are some common invitations or excuses you hear?
I've always read this passage, imagining it like an invitation to salvation. So the excuses that I always think of are, I don't deserve it. I've heard that before, like even on someone's deathbed, saying, "I just don't deserve it. I don't the life I've lived." Or it could be someone saying, I want to accept God, but I think there's more life I need to experience before that. Essentially saying, I want to live the life I want to live, and after I've done that for a bit and I've had my fun, then maybe I'll consider the invitation. I've heard for salvation, I've heard those kinds of excuses. In terms of an invitation that God has given me to either speak to someone or to act in a way, the excuses I've given are, they don't want to hear anything, or I don't want to bother them, or I don't want to be a nuisance, or maybe it could be if he's calling me to give money to someone or act generous. My excuses are I just don't have the money for that right now, or I'm just not in a place right now where that's possible. But with God, anything is possible, and so I think that it's easy to think of excuses for ourselves, but when it's God's invitation, you should always accept that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever really thought about this in terms of like an invitation to church or anything like that. 'Cause I've thought of it as a salvation
Mhm.
idea, and I think in our Wednesday night series we're doing on evangelism,
Hmm.
and this past week was a whole list of excuses you talked about, and the one that stuck out to me, that because I think there's a lot of excuses that there's not much we can do to like combat it, but I think the one that stuck out to me was, well, look at all of these Christians. I know this Christian, and they've made no change in their life, and that's kind of the one that stuck out. It's other Christians aren't any better than any other person I know, so
Right.
why would I want to be a Christian and join that group? I think that was the most painful one, because I think there's some things that we can do as Christians to help combat that.
In terms of salvation, and unfortunately, we equate coming to church with salvation, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive completely. I think the discipleship process happens in the context of relationship, and I think you have to have that. But you know, one of the excuses are everybody's a hypocrite. You know,
Mhm.
that would often be a um, I, but outside of the conversation about salvation, because I do think the invitations that he gives to us are a little bit broader. That invitation to come closer, to know me better, to know me more. Um, I don't have time. I'm too busy. So I'm thinking about one for myself right now. And it involves y'all too. But so we are prepping for, planning for a prayer service in the coming year. That's what we want. We want the church to have a prayer service. And um, I believe it's been effective for us as a staff. We invited our leaders in for one, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. All the feedback, even from people who I think it was a brand new thing for, spoke very positively about it. But we're using one I don't want to say it's pre-made, but there's somebody already doing it well that we can use their format. But the only time we can use it on a regular basis is going to be Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And in my mind, I'm saying, I don't want to be, forget everybody else. It's not what everybody else thinks. I just don't want to be committed every Saturday morning. It's inconvenient. But at the same time, in my opinion, it's an invitation from God for us to draw closer to Him, for us to raise the spiritual bar, temperature, whatever you say in the church, for us all to move a little bit closer to try to avoid some of that hypocrisy that we see, where we're shaped and molded. And I feel a bit guilty saying, I don't want to commit my Saturday morning. And so that's a dilemma. It's a dilemma for me. Maybe it's not a dilemma for y'all, but you understand, like,
Mm.
my Saturdays are never free because about halfway through the day, Saturday, I would prefer it starts winding down. That's my preference. I go to bed the earliest on Saturday night just because it's Sunday morning. So it's not like all day Saturday, but if I cut my Saturday morning out, then my whole day's done,
Mhm.
And
Right.
so and that's not an excuse. I just want everybody to understand it's not always, okay, I want to go drink and party and have a good time and I'll get saved when I can. I think sometimes he's there's this conversation come to me, draw closer to me, and we have excuses why we don't. That's just what I'm wrestling with right now. Can you think of times where you've wrestled? What were you getting ready to say, Alyssa?
No, I think that they're on the prayer service, and this is might be going down path that, but I think you have to be able to balance rest and I don't know that if we're doing a Saturday at 10 a.m. prayer service that we have allow people to have a day of rest then. But I think that there are when I was deciding to where to go to college and what to do, there was that struggle of like I really loved marching band and theater and all of these things, and I knew that the college that I kind of felt like I was supposed to go to was not going to have quality programs. They didn't even have a marching band. They do now, but
do they really? Do they have football?
Oh, football is huge.
Okay.
Yes. I'm one person from there made it to the practice squad
on the NFL.
On the NFL.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That's a
big deal. No, I mean that really is a big deal.
And I kind of mocked it when I was there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big deal because I mean they make a practice team player makes $11,000 a week for every week they're on.
I know a lot about practice squad recently because of some TikToks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I know is because I got a couple of guys I follow that are on, and I was like, what's the use of being on the practice squad? You know, to get paid. Yeah, so that's a pretty good gig. So.
But I had to kind of make that decision as to what was the most important thing. Was I going to follow the calling into ministry and doing that, or was I going to maybe do some of these things that were more fun? And that was a struggle.
Even Steve, as you were talking about with the prayer service, that's something that I've been considering too, because I've really been enjoying doing it in the staff meetings, but even thinking, this is not me complaining about having like too much work or like, but my weekends are very full because that's usually when my students are available to meet. That's when they have games a lot of times. And so for me, it's even with that, you've got to have a balance with rest, but there are always opportunities that arise that I'm like, gosh, like I pray about it. I'm like, I know God's calling me to do this. Like this is important. I really need to do this. Even if it means carving out some time to do something that I enjoy, because there are definitely sacrifices that we need to make for God. I think that Christ made the ultimate sacrifice for us. I can sacrifice an hour or two, to be there for someone who needs me, or to invest in my own prayer life, So I think that it's important to find a balance, but also to realize, we do have to make sacrifices.
Yeah. So you guys will read this after the fact, but we have a leadership memo. So our deacons, elders, staff gets a kind of a rundown every week, and I include an article of some kind. So the article that I included this week are 10 potential idols in my life. And some of these I can see. Some of them I hadn't really thought about. Number 1, worry. Number 2, iPhone. I don't know why Androids aren't included, but that's what it says.
No one idolizes Androids. I mean, come on
now. Lust, recognition, sports, working out, work, dollars, perfectionism, anger, self. So, like, I have to think. It just myself gets in the way.
I think sports is my idol.
Yeah. You are a sports fan, though, right?
No.
No? I thought you liked football and baseball, like
Quidditch.
What?
Quidditch.
Don't show us your sports prowess on the podcast. You probably should.
Have you ever seen competitive knitting before? Man, it gets crazy. It's like speed knitting, underwater basket weaving, chess boxing. All right. Well, I like sports. Maybe it is an idol for me. Now I'm realizing. Chess boxing is exciting.
Chess
Boxing, yes. Have you seen it before? Have you seen it?
If I would, I wouldn't
at the end, or
Chess boxing.
like chess pieces.
You play you play a game of chess, and you have like 1 minute to make your moves, right? And then the game either ends if someone gets like a checkmate, or after a minute of playing, you go into a minute of boxing. You box each other in a ring.
Where do you find this stuff at?
It's all over the place. It's very big in England.
No, it's
I feel
not.
like we're getting
Oh, yes.
It's
Oh, it's
big
becoming
where?
big.
In Edenton?
In England.
Oh, I was like, what?
It's becoming a big
I
thing
want
here,
to go
though.
watch some chess boxing.
They just had a huge tournament. I could show you. It was awesome. It's great. Then you're all like delirious because you just got punched in the face like 50 times, and you got to go back to playing chess then for another minute. And so you're like delirious, but you're trying to make moves. And then if no one gets a checkmate,
seriously,
then
where do you see this stuff at?
you can find it on YouTube.
You can find there's a lot of things on YouTube you shouldn't
But
find.
millions of people watch it. It's not like I didn't just make this up. So it's an actual sport. They're like bleeding on the chessboard. It's crazy. It's insane.
Underwater basket weaving is a real thing.
I don't know if underwater basket weaving is a real thing. It was the name of a course. I think at Yale they have like a course called underwater basket weaving. It's really like
I always thought it was a joke.
I think it is a joke. That one I think is a joke. Although I have done basket weaving, and you do need to get the basket wet in order to weave it. It helps. So you could theoretically do underwater basket weaving. I wouldn't say it's a competitive sport. We're in Luke, by the way.
Talking about things that distract you from God. If you're here, let me say it like this. This is what I got to say. If you're deep enough in YouTube that you're finding chess boxing, you're too deep. That's what I'm saying. You have missed the Lord a long time ago. I mean,
oh man, we're gonna watch this on the big. We're gonna watch this on the big screen someday. You're gonna see. It's.
I can't wait.
It's exciting. Oh man,
that'll be mine and yours next competition.
That'd be awesome. Oh, that'd be great. Hey, that'd be pretty awesome. That'd be pretty good. So
no, it wouldn't.
We gotta go this big.
What would it be exciting about getting your face beat?
Well, we have these gigantic punching gloves we use for youth group. They're huge, like balloon ones, and you like that would be so much fun. That would be a lot of fun. So I would love the chess. I would love the chess box at youth group. That'd be hilarious. The students would go crazy for that. That'd be awesome.
Oh,
what was this passage?
It's it won't about chess boxing, that's for sure. So we need to close.
But in closing, yeah, excuses. I mean, we can come up with excuses all day long, but ultimately there's no excuse. I gotta bring it back.
You can't.
There's no excuse great enough to pass up on the Lord.
There's no excuse for the way this podcast turned out.
Amen to that.
Thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue our conversation around the book of Luke.